Hello, friends. Welcome to the Life Stories podcast. My name is Kyle Thompson. I'm the lead pastor of Life Community Church in Roseville, California. As a pastor, I get to sit down with phenomenal people almost every day, and I hear these phenomenal stories, and I just think the world needs to hear these stories. I'm excited to bring this podcast to you for two reasons. First, I hope as you hear these stories and say, me too, and you can relate with them. And secondly, if you can relate with them, and if you can see how God is at work in someone else's story, I hope it helps you see how God is at work in your story. This morning, I get to introduce you to a good friend of mine, Joni Gonzales. Joni is actually on staff at our church. She's a guest services director, but her story is confusing to me, so I had to have her on as one of our first guests because I still don't understand. Joni, help me understand. Your last name is Gonzales.
Yep.
You lived in Mexico.
Yep.
But you're a blonde white girl from Placerville.
Yep.
How does all that work?
Well, I guess starting out, my parents, we lived up in Placerville on a big, huge area of land, and it was like a church called Prayer Mountain. And there was a tie between. That was a church in Sacramento, in the heart of Sacramento. And that was called Revival Center. And so I was born in Sacramento, raised in Placerville. And over a period of time, times were kind of hard, and my parents always kind of struggled through. And at one point, my parents got wiped out by the IRS, and we didn't have much, and we didn't know what to do. So...
How old were you when your parents lost everything?
I was 5.
Now, at 5, do you have any sort of idea of what that's like? I mean, do you just know the stress? I mean, how much can you possibly comprehend at 5?
I remember my mom we would get in the car and we'd go get groceries, and we had no money. We were on food stamps, and it wasn't the like EBT card. It was like a straight up food stamp book. And my mom always was like trying to just make sure that we had food to eat. And I remember getting in the car every single time, and she would be like, Lord, blind us from the highway patrol, the CHP, and the police, unless we need them because our car broke down. That was like the fact that I remember every single time, and every day that she prayed it. Not one time did we ever get pulled over, but the one time that we did get pulled over. So it was funny to me to think about how prayer means something, and relationship with God. And my mom was always strong in her faith, and my dad was always strong in their faith. But being wiped out was tough. And I do remember the hardships. Not all of them, because I mean, there was so much joy even in those seasons that it didn't seem that bad.
So I hear deep commitment to God, to prayer, but also struggles in life. So your family's wiped out at 5, and then what happens?
So my dad, he had a friend down in Cabo, San Lucas, Mexico, and he invited him to come and work for him. So he went down there for about 6 months by himself prior to me and my mom and my sisters going down there. And my older sister was kind of getting ornery. So I have 2 sisters. It's me, Michelle, and Nikki. Nikki's the oldest, and Michelle is the youngest. And it was tough. My mom was all by herself then and trying to figure things out. And my dad's down in Cabo. And so my mom sent Nikki to go there. And she got to spend some time with my dad, and she's about 2 years older than me. And
wait, help me understand this. Nikki's getting in trouble, and she got sent to Cabo? I want to get in trouble.
Well, it was that it's 3 kids. My mom was one person, and by herself raising 3 kids is no simple task.
Wow. And
so then she went down there and spent some time with my dad. And mind you, I gave my heart to God when I was a kid. But, as life, goes through and you kind of get to the point. So we moved down to Cabo. And Cabo was beautiful, wonderful, incredible. A completely different set of people that you would never, ever even imagine the love and warmth that you would receive every single time that you would walk in the street. People would wave at me. People would be friends with, well, actually, I was friends with everybody at the grocery store since I was like super young. My mom was always scared about that. She's like, oh yeah, Mom, you need to, make friends your own age. Stop just talking to the random clerk. And I was like, but I like them and they're my friend now. But anyhow, I'll get back.
Those of us who know you are not surprised. So you moved down to Cabo at what age?
I was 5.5 or just before I turned 6. We left when I was in kindergarten, going into 1st grade.
And how long did you live in Cabo?
Oh, gosh. Okay, from when I was around 6 until I turned 10, and then we moved back to the States later.
Pues hablas español?
Sí, claro que sí.
Okay, so you learned. So you were down there till 10. You said everyone's friendly down there. What brought you guys back to the States?
My parents, okay, so over that time, I ended up doing some private school down there, and my parents did end up getting out of debt to the IRS. They paid them off, and we were able to come back to the States and live here. And my dad ended up getting a job in New Mexico, and we were missing family this whole time. And it's kind of hard, living in another country and not having a complete support system, and all of our family still up here. And so my dad had a job offer for New Mexico, so we lived there, and we only lived there for 6 months in Santa Fe. And then we came back, and I went to school for 6 months there. That was it. And then we moved to Carmichael, and we moved in with my grandmother. And I went to a school called Garfield Elementary School. And then I actually went to Schweitzer first, and I was there by myself, and my sister went to the other one. And so, yeah.
How do you think all this moving around has shaped you and made you who you are today?
Oh, man. Okay, so when I was a little girl, we drove the Baja about 8 to 10 times. And every time he would say, we're going on an adventure. And so instead of it being like a bad thing, we literally packed up a little tiny itsy bitsy white car, probably a little bit like yours, but not as nice. And literally it was covered from just... It looked like a clown car. I mean, honestly, the way that we had it packed down, it was so it was so packed. And like when we started piling out of the car, they're like, is there anything else coming? Is there, it was a lot. And so we drove the Baja, and doing that was like a crazy experience, but remembering that like each time that we went, there was an adventure, and there was something to glorify God for. And there was something that was like wonderful along with something that was not so wonderful, including car breakdowns and going through the auroras after a hurricane, and lots of fun adventures.
So I hear about this deep faith, again, growing up on Prayer Mountain, believing in prayer. The one time we did get pulled over was the one time we didn't pray. So I'm guessing you just had a very super spiritual upbringing and have walked with Jesus and done it Jesus way your entire life. Is that right?
Oh, that's funny that you say that. Well, I remember giving my heart to Jesus as a little girl. I remember being up at Prayer Mountain and at Revival Center, and listening to the pastors preach and listening to the stories that they would tell about the Word of God, and hearing other people's testimonies, but not ultimately. I gave my life to God, but I kind of took it back when I turned about 12.
What happened when you turned 12? Now the story gets good here. Get to the teen years. What happened?
Okay, so we moved to back to the States, and then we lived in New Mexico for a short term. Then we moved to back to California. And as we're living here, my parents are saving money, and they're kind of getting things going. And they were able to buy a house. My dad worked at Folsom Lake Toyota, and he became the Internet and Leasing Department manager, and really enjoyed doing that. But life all of a sudden hit like a huge, a wall. My dad was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and it was pretty devastational. My dad's quite a bit older than my mom. They're about 15 years different. My dad's 75 and my mom's 60, or just around that age. I think I have it wrong still, but they know that I love them. So my dad got cancer, and my parents weren't upfront with us. They didn't tell us what was going on. We just knew that there was something going on. And so when I was around 12, I was kind of on the verge of adolescence and trying to figure out, who I am and what I am, and wanting to go and do things. So I worked for my best friend's grandma, and she would let us come over there. We would clean her house, and then we'd clean her business, and then learn how to do data entry, this and that. So she helped us out a lot. And I kind of was still, I love the Lord, but I was kind of doing my own thing a little bit. And I started getting a little bit further and a little bit further. And it was where we were living in a nice house off of Manzanita. And as my parents are going through these hard times, I started going and doing my own thing with older kids. I wanted to hang out with my sister and my sister's friends, and my sister got into some trouble.
A sister who was already getting in trouble Started hanging out with her. Oh, okay.
She's got her own transformation story, let me tell you.
Okay, maybe we'll have her on the pod at some point.
She lives in Cabo. It's a little hard, but yes, she'd love to one day.
Okay. So what happened?
So I started hanging out with like a bunch of kids that also had kind of hard upbringings. And we started hanging out with older guys and older people and just thinking that that was like the coolest thing in the world. And I found myself going to, lying to my parents, of course. I told them that we were going to go to the state fair with my best friend, Kara, at the time. And we kind of just were mischievous. And we were like, we'll go. We'll tell them that we have a ride there. If they get us there, we have a ride home. Well, that wasn't accurate. That was a total lie. And so I ended up going down there, and that's how I ended up getting into the most trouble of my entire life, which was walking down the road of meeting somebody that was older than me. And I was so naive at the time, and I was so lost because my parents' circumstance was rough. And so he had a car. And so I started dating him. How old were you and how old was he? I was 14, or maybe a little bit less. I may have been like 13 turning 14. And he was already 17, he was already older than me, but he had a car. And so we became great friends, and not really. But I ended up getting in a relationship with him, and that ended up being the detriment to my walk with God for a while, because I kind of went off in my own ways thinking that I had to hide everything from everyone. And so during that time, I completely started to shun my family. And during that time, my parents said, hey, guess what? We love you guys so much. Cancer, we've been fighting it, but we don't want to live this life anymore. We're going to go back to Cabo.
Whoa. So something you said very interesting. You said, this relationship was life-changing for you. Again, you didn't give us all the details. That I think we can all use our imaginations, but you start to make some poor choices, and the shame of that alienates you from your friends and family. The people who be there to love you and help you no matter, the people who say, I will love you no matter what. There's some lie that you tell yourself that said, if they knew the real me, they may not love me. And so the shame creates a duplicitous life, and I bet that even creates even more shame, more divide. And here you are dating this older guy. And after how long had you guys been dating when your parents said, we're moving back to Cabo?
Oh gosh, probably about a year that we were talking. And I just began high school then. And so I went to my freshman and my sophomore year at Del Campo High School. And I was on the basketball team, loved doing it. But I was also divided from a whole group of my friends. And so I kind of was starting to just adventure into other friendships that probably weren't healthy friendships. And so talking to this guy, later on, I ended up kind of shunning all those people in my life, friends, not friends, and just wanting to have something that was, that I was special or something. So I got tricked in my own light, in my own world, and in my own flesh. And that's where I ended up going down like a really, really dark, deep place for a long time. So.
But help me understand. I thought your parents said you guys were moving back to Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
But you were, how did that work? I mean, you've got this long-term boyfriend, you've been together over a year, but you're moving back to Cabo. What happened there?
So my parents, I was in high school, and then my dad's like, okay, we're going back. The life down there, it's way better. It's slower pace. Here in the United States, everybody's go, go, go. And it's a high-stress life, and you don't get to enjoy life. And so they wanted to go there. And so I was in my sophomore year when they told me that we're moving to Mexico. And I was like, no, you can't. We can't go back. I loved Mexico, but I really didn't want to go back because I wasn't going to graduate with my class, and I wasn't going to get to do any of the things that I wanted to do. And my sister, so by sophomore year, my sister was just graduating. So when she graduated that summer, we left. And I went down there, and my boyfriend at the time, we broke up for a short season. And when we broke up for the short season, I went down to Cabo, and that's when I became the MC at the beach.
Oh, okay. A couple of things I got to clarify. First time you guys go down to Mexico, this is awesome. It's an adventure. Second time, oh, this is ruining my life. And then you've told me this before. You said when you went down to Mexico, you became an MC. Well, what does that even mean? How did that happen, and what did you do?
Okay, well, so I went down there, and my dad's like, oh, just have some fun. You and your boyfriend just broke up. My dad's saved. He just was like, oh, just have a good time, but don't, he wasn't trying to tell me to go overboard. But we went to the beach, and I went down there, and there was a bikini contest, and they were like, oh, yeah, that sounds like fun. So I joined the bikini contest and I ended up winning. I won like $1,000 and some crazy thing. So then I ended up dating the MC. And I was like, he was way older than me, but I was like, okay, well, that's fun for a minute. And after meeting him, I ended up like, he cheated on me or something like that. So I went and I took his job. So then I ended up doing his job as the MC at the beach for a short season.
So you're a teenager, you win a bikini contest, start dating the MC, he cheats on you, and payback, you take his job?
Not like, you're making me out to be like I'm really mean.
Oh, I don't think so. I think it's a great story. I love this.
No, but that was our joke. And at the end of the day, that wasn't why I got the job or anything like that. And down in Mexico is a totally different world than it is up here. I mean, going there and getting a job, you are not allowed to take the job of somebody that is a national of the area. You are not allowed to take a job that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do if you were not white, they said. So there's only very few and far between jobs that you can do when you're down there. And it costs a lot of money to get a job. So you have to pay like a huge chunk of money up front, which was like $5,000. And so the company that I work for paid $5,000 for me to go and work there. And I had to carry around my FM address all the time, or else the federales and the Mexican police would come and find you. And so I was like, okay, I don't ever want to get in trouble. I'll never do anything bad, especially down there. And so I worked at the beach and I got to do that for a short season, but it was an adventure, and I never drank alcohol during that season of time. I was the sober MC, so that was good, right?
Good for you.
Yeah, I know. I have to remind people that I still am Joni. Like, oh, she turned into a this or that. So I did that for a short season, and then I didn't want to live there. I told my parents, I was like, I don't want to be here. It's the end of summer and I don't have school. I don't have anything. You guys didn't enroll me in anything and I'm not going to graduate with my class. And I was super upset, but I was also starting to talk to my kid's dad again. My boyfriend at the time. Whoa.
Okay, spoiler alert, preview of things that happen. So you come back, you start talking to the older guy who you met earlier, who had the car, he was older than you. When you start coming back, you guys reconnect. And then what happens?
Well, I lied to my parents. I told them I was moving in with my best friend and her mom, and they lied for me too. And then I actually moved in with my boyfriend at the time and his parents.
How old were you?
I was like 16.
So at 16, you lie to your mom and dad, say, who are living in Mexico. Yeah. You come to the States to live with your boyfriend? Oh, wow. All right, here we go. The plot thickens.
So
Keep going.
So I came back and I was here for like 4 months and I had my job back. I actually worked at Dairy Queen. And so I came back and I was working and everything like that. And within 4 months, I was pregnant.
Wow.
Found out I was pregnant on my birthday. I was like, it happened. It had to have happened fast because I was already like quite some time along. And being a kid, not knowing what to do. And I'm like, well, I didn't want to have an abortion and I just didn't know what else to do. And so my dad comes to visit me right before Christmas. And my birthday's in October, so that's a couple months later. I couldn't tell my parents. I was so scared that if I told them that they would disown me. And I had put through every single imaginary possibility of the things that my parents would say to me and that they would just say, well, we're done. We live in Mexico. You live in the States. And I guess you can figure it out. But he came here and I spent the whole week with him and I couldn't tell him the truth. And he took me shopping and he took me to spend some time with me and I still couldn't tell him the truth. And I'm like, but it was killing me on the inside. So the night before he goes back, he comes to see me at my job and I said, Dad, I need to talk to you. And he's like, okay, let's sit and let's talk. And I said, Dad, I'm pregnant. That was the worst conversation I think I ever had.
So you're living this lie that says if they knew the real me, they wouldn't love me, so you hide it. But then you find the courage to tell him. What is it like emotionally when you tell him? And then how does your dad respond to his 17-year-old daughter?
Wasn't even 17 yet. But he just said, I love you so much. And no matter what, we love you. And he wasn't going to disown me. But he was devastated. He says, I feel so bad because he's like literally getting on the next flight out. And he's like, I just can't, I'm so sorry. He doesn't have any words. He just says, I love you. And, I feel like I'm leaving my baby here, which is me. And so anyhow,
some time went by, and he told my mom, and my mom was mad because I didn't tell her myself because I was so scared to tell her. And then it was like a long season, and they ended up coming back for when he was born, and that was a wonderful blessing. And but I was still on my own, walking on my own, not walking with God at all. I'd pray and I'd ask God for things, and I'd kind of, dibble dabble, but the guy that I was with, he wasn't, saved. He didn't really know God. He didn't have anything. And so if anything, I felt more convicted because I knew that we weren't equally yoked. I knew that he was not the one that God had for me, but I was so trapped in the idea of somebody caring about me, and that I was willing to lie to myself for a really long time about it. And so later on down the line, I ended up, we moved in and had our own place, this and that. And then I found him and I caught him cheating on me. Little Rigo was a year old at the time, and I was so devastated. I just had this gut feeling. I just knew that there was something wrong. And I was like, I have no peace. And I had already started just like knowing that I wasn't in the right place at the right time. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so I went and I actually caught him in the act, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. So the next day I move out. My cousin DeAndre and my cousin Christina came, and they helped me move from a 3rd-story building all the way down to I ended up moving in with them in Natomas. And within a month, I ended up getting a really, really wonderful job because my cousin Chris and DeAndre, they helped me to and that was Mr. Pickles. Her best friend owned 2 of them. And so anyhow, I started working there, and I was getting my life on track. And so they helped me with Little Rigo, and just, it was total adventure. But I was, turning my life back over to God, doing my daily devotions with the Lord, and just wanting to seek him, but really not knowing what I'm supposed to do as a mom. And so I moved to Donegal. I moved into my own condo. I had my own place. I was so proud that I finally could do something with myself. And then I started my kid's dad goes, one day as I'm, doing the drop off pickup situation, he goes, oh, I really love you. And I was like, he's like, you're ruining Little Rigo's life. And I was devastated. I was like, you're right. I am ruining his life. Like, how can I raise him by myself and do all of this stuff? And so I foolishly fell back into the trap. He goes, I'm going to church. He started going to church, and he tricked me so easily because it was what I wanted to believe. And I knew that it wasn't right. So I refrained from having any sexual relations with him for 6 months. And then the moment that I compromised myself again, I knew that it was done and that it was not going anywhere good. And I ended up finding out, I got pregnant again.
Wow.
And it was like devastational. But that is when I sought God out in a whole new way, like serious way. I don't think that you could even imagine the, shame on me, once it's my shame. Shame on me again. Oh, Lord. At that point that I was going to, I could raise 2 kids, but I can't raise 2 kids and a grown man. So I told him to get out and I'll figure it out. The whole time I had faith. I knew that God was there. I wasn't walking with him. And it is a relationship. It's like how we desire to have a husband and wife scenario. You want to be loved, but you also want to love. And it is unconditional love. It's the same bond that we have when we have a kid. It's totally different than a worldly, like, oh yeah, I love you. But it was something that it was a really, really hard season. So at that time I was working 60-hour weeks by myself while I'm pregnant and have a little one. And
you're 18, 19.
Yeah. He also had cheated on me with my nanny. So that kind of made things really ugly. So I had to let him have Little Rigo, and he wanted to watch, once I had Annalise, he would have his girlfriend, who was my babysitter, watch our kids. So, and I don't even mean to badmouth him, because we actually later on down the line are really, really composed, and we can have a conversation. But during the season of life, my life was just upside down, and that's when I gave my life completely back over to the Lord. And I remember crying in my room one night, and I just said, God, I can't do this. I don't know what I'm doing. And he told me, he said, 5 years. I was like, 5 years what? He's all, 5 years, it'll be different. Follow through with pregnancy, 5 years, your life will be completely different. And so every day started seeking him out, having a relationship with him, and just things that I would have never expected he did. And the love that he showed me was just a totally different thing. And it was the comfort and the desire that I had inside of my heart the whole entire time. But it wasn't going to be fulfilled by somebody of this world. And God is the ultimate healer. And so I went through the season, and I started actually getting relationship with my family again, with my aunts and uncles who live close. And I started going to church with them, and worked 6 days a week. Sunday, I got to go to church. And this is a crazy miracle, and I don't even know if anybody will believe it, but it was crazy because I drove to Gridley. I forgot my wallet at home. No joke. And so I get going to come back, and I'm like, oh yeah, I need to fuel up. I'll drive back home. My phone is dead, and I was in Gridley, but I was like leaving, and I was like, oh, if I can just get to the fuel station, find out I have no money. I was like, oh, great. And so I get back on the road, and I just start praying. I said, God, I don't know how I'm getting home. I was far away. I was past Yuba City, and I lived in Citrus Heights. And I just started praying like I've never prayed before. And he just got me all the way home. And it was like, I couldn't even believe it. So I got home, and I was able to get gas and do all of this stuff, but it was just a miracle that I needed to see. And he just said, I'm right there. And then years went by, like, of just all of these amazing things that the Lord would do in my life that wasn't possible without him. And then one day my grandma, she's like, I just had Annalise, and she said, you need me as much as I need you. And she asked me to come and move in with her. And I was still doing it on my own, figuring things out. But my kid's dad was kind of taking me in to get custody of the kids. And I was like, he had a lawyer. I didn't. The battle just didn't seem like I could ever win. Every time I would go in, I was like, I'm losing. And how can I be losing? And I was devastated and stuff in that season, but she just said, move in with me. And I said, okay. So I moved in with my Oma, and that's my desert. That was my desert. My grandma taught me how to be. So my Oma story is a crazy story. She lived in Germany during the Holocaust and all this stuff. And this is kind of going on a tangent, but she is an incredible woman. And she married my Opa, and they lived here and had their kids. Well, 25 years into their marriage, my Opa had a stroke, and he became paralyzed. And my grandmother took care of him for 25 years. So her version of marriage and love and commitment was so far greater than anything that I had ever seen, witnessed, thought of. And so she started walking me through some of those scenarios. And she took care of things. She took care of the house. She took care of life. And she was just so hardcore. And I just was like in admiration. But it was also a season where her and I got to seek God together. And we would do Bible study, and we would go to church together. But she also taught me how to be a wife and how to be a mother in a whole new perspective. Little Brie goes 4, going through 4-year-old behavior. And one day she's like, he needs to be on punishment. And I'm like, yes, he does. But I didn't know what to do. He was completely out of control. And she said, you will not do that to your mother. And she held him in the corner, and he stood there. And that was the beginning of good behavior. Wow. It was so different. And I looked at my Oma, and I was like, God bless me so big. But going through the desert isn't always easy. Like when you're there in the desert and you're like, everybody has their own version of what the desert is, but mine's a training ground. That's what it was all about. That was the whole entire purpose. And so as I was going through these seasons, God was teaching me things and getting me prepared. And I would be praying. And that was the first time in my life that I ever started praying for the man that God would bless me with one day. I prayed, don't bless me with the one that I want. Bless me with the one that you have for me, because I know it's going to be far greater than anything that I could ever pick for myself, because I don't pick winners. I pick losers. And I was like, it was so hard, but praying that the Lord would be the provider, the blesser, and the protector of me and my children. And of course, having 2 kids, you're now like in a totally different world. It's not like you're some, amazing, you feel like you're not an amazing catch anymore, And you have a lot of baggage, and you have a lot of extras. And it was just a weird season of life, but it was a wonderful season because of the growth that God was able to do inside of my spirit and kind of just wake me up and grow me up a little bit. And so later on down the line is not that long, Annalise was
7 months old, and I had been praying already. So my whole pregnancy long, I was praying. And then into the relationship with me spending time with my Oma, I ended up going out to dinner with a set of friends. And I was like, man, there's this guy at the table. But I was like, okay, well, I'm not reaching out to him. I'm not talking to him, anything like that. But I never talked to him. And then the next, like a month and a half or 2 or 3 months later, whenever it was, no, a month and a half, we went to a wedding. And I don't know if you know me, but I'm not normally a nervous person, but I was more nervous than anything. He asked me to dance, and we started dancing at this wedding, and his parents were holding Annalise because she was with me. Riga was camping. And so we were dancing, and some other guy cuts in to dance with me. And I was like, no way. Like, all right. And so I felt like a normal person again. Like I had gut butterflies when I was dancing with Drew, and some other guy cuts in. So when I'm dancing with this other guy, Drew goes and he picks up Annalise and he holds her and he danced with her. And she's like a little baby. And I'm just like, honestly, like my heart just was like, wow, that's incredible. So anyway, the end of the wedding comes and I'm like, I'm an independent mom. I could do this by myself. I've got a giant, huge stroller. I've got a diaper bag on my arm and I've got the baby on the other side. And he comes running up and he's like, no, he's like, I'm helping you. And I was like, okay. And so he walks me up the hill and then we spent 2 hours without talking. Annalise fell asleep in the car, and we talked for 2 hours outside the car, and it was just incredible. And so my parents were visiting from Mexico. After this conversation, I go home, and they're visiting my Oma's house, and I go in and I tell my dad, I said, Dad, I met the man I'm going to marry. And he goes, don't jump too fast, Joni. So anyhow, I had asked the Lord a while back for some confirmations because I was so scared that I was going to meet somebody that wasn't going to be a good person and all of these things. And so I asked straight up for some serious requests. And no joke, years down the line after meeting Drew, I knew he was the man that I was going to marry, but I had asked the Lord years prior that it would be little Rigo would be the one to tell me that he's going to be the one I was going to marry. So I was driving down the road and one day he goes, so when are you going to marry him, Mom? And I was like, I busted out in the most ridiculous amount of tears because it was the exact thing that I had asked God.
How old's Rigo at that point?
He's 4, 5. He's young. He's a little kid. He's preschool age.
So you asked God for this specific miracle, and he uses a 4-year-old to do it. Mm-hmm. And here you are, a single mom, driving down the freeway, crying, probably not safe to drive.
The way that God does things is never the way that we can imagine. And we're the ones that put ourselves on our own detours. And God's the one that realigns our path. And so when God realigned the path, it was more beautiful than anything that I could have ever asked God for. Yes, there's still challenges. Yes, there's still struggles. But the way that the Lord presented him to me was just so much different than anything. There's guys that asked me out. It wasn't but I was committed. I had said, I'm not dating you unless you're willing to meet me at church. And that was a huge part in this stuff. And that was after the wedding. I think a week later, he asked, he's like, oh, do you want to hang out? And I said, well, do you want to come to church? And it was actually during that same week. And it was for me, I had already committed that the only way I was going to date somebody is if they met me at church. With everybody else that I tried to ask, I was like, they didn't meet me at church, so I guess not. And I didn't have time. I had 2 kids and I needed to be able to spend all my time with them. And so I invited him to my family's Bible study up in Placerville, actually it was Folsom at the time. And my dad was there. He had no idea. So he comes, he shows up, and I didn't tell him it was at my family's house. So he's like, okay, so he meets my whole family and, it's Bible study. And then, so we're talking and every single day, we've never gone a day without talking. And this is short period since the time that we met at the wedding. And he invites me to go to his brother's birthday. And so I said, okay, well, if you come to church in the morning on Sunday, I'll go to the party with you. But my mom told me to go to the party. And she's like, you need to just go. And I was like, okay. Well, I go to the party and I don't know what came across me, but he's standing there and I'm looking at him and there's a pool. And I don't even know what happened, but all of a sudden I pushed him in the pool with his clothes on and his cell phone in his pocket. I don't know what I was doing. I still to this day can't figure it out. And he gets out of the pool and he wasn't even mad at me. I was like, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I did that.
So this guy shows up to your parents' house for a Bible study, and you push him in a pool?
After the Bible study. That was a couple days later.
That's a big difference, Joni. Thank you. Why'd you push him in the pool?
I still don't know.
Sounds like something I would have done when I had a crush. I was like, I don't know how to deal with all these feelings. And
well, he was like standing there, and then I was looking at him, and I was like, I was like, why did I do that? I still there is nothing that I would have made me think that I would normally do that. So anyway, that same exact day, I was like, well, I guess if he really likes me, then, he won't stop talking to me. And I go home, and then I guess he and talks to the friend of ours that was the bride at the wedding, and he gets my phone number again. His phone was broken, so he had to do something with his phone to fix his phone. And I was like, man, he likes me.
So he dances with Annalise at the wedding, or Annalise at the wedding. He comes to a Bible study, gets pushed in the pool, and then goes and finds your phone number again. This guy's in it to win it.
I was shocked too. But anyhow, he calls me in seriously every single day. We never went a day without talking. And then that was when life started to begin for our relationship. And before we got married, we were not we weren't doing everything right. And but there was something we went down to Mexico because he wanted to ask my dad for permission. I was like, you don't have to ask him. He doesn't even live here. And then he's like, no, but I need to. So we buy plane tickets. We go down there. We stay there. And of course, we're actually living together at this point. But my parents are like, okay, so he's going to sleep in a cot in the room it's actually a closet. And then I get to sleep in my sister's bedroom with her 2 kids and on a giant bed. And that was a funny story, but my parents go there and the proposal. So we go there for a marriage we go there and they're in the middle of a week-long marriage conference. And we're there and we go through and it's 12 hours a day. And we were like, I thought we were here on vacation. But and so anyhow, we ended up doing some healing while we were there. And he wrote me a letter and I wrote him, and it was an apology of we went about this a little bit wrong. Let's do this. And he wanted to marry me before. We had already bought my wedding ring and everything like that. But we went down there and he sits at the table with my parents at the last night that we're there. And my dad made food. It was ceviche, my favorite dinner. And we're sitting around the table.
Shrimp or fish ceviche?
Oh, fish. Absolutely. Pescado. Okay. But the whole entire table, we're sitting there. But Drew likes the camarones. Okay.
Okay.
So,
okay. I'm watching Drew.
The table, we're sitting there and Drew said, I love your daughter and I love your grandkids and I want to care for them and I want to provide for them. And my dad is crying. My mom is crying. My sister's bawling. I'm crying. I'm like, Jesus. And Drew doesn't cry. He spoke with emotion, but he didn't cry. But that emotion that I saw in him was something that was a game changer for me because it was heartfelt and it was so real. And it was a commitment. And I was just so blessed. The Lord has done so many wonderful things. Challenges, yes, but wonderful, wonderful blessings. And so we end up, we were planning our wedding and we get married. And I find out I was pregnant with Juliana. And so wonderful, wonderful. It was just a surreal, And so as we start walking through life and going through all of these scenarios, we've had some super incredible things that have happened along the way. There's many, many, many more testimonies, but when you start giving it over to God and he's the one that starts making your decisions, it becomes a lot easier. And I guarantee you, I don't like making decisions. I actually think I'm you know what? Just let them decide for me. But it's better when God decides. Wow. So,
2 questions as we wrap up. God said, hey, 5 years from now, it's going to be totally different. How would you describe how your life was different back then? And would 5 years earlier, Joni believed what was going to happen if God had told you everything? So how was it different? And would you have believed God?
5 years, we were married. 5 years, we were in a relationship that I would have never dreamed of having.
It was far greater than anything that I could have dreamt up or thought of. He is a balance of who I am. He's not who I am. He's who he is, and I am who I am. But he makes me into a better person. He grows me and helps me to mature, and he recognizes things about me and helps me. And I desire so much to do the same for him. 5 years. I sat there, on Elise's fifth birthday, 5 years gone by. And I was like, wow, I couldn't have ever imagined it. I don't think that anybody ever really knows what it is that God's going to do, but to trust is the whole point. We put our trust in him. And I feel like if God says he's going to do something beautiful, he's going to do something beautiful. I just couldn't fathom what it was going to be. But I knew that it wasn't going to be anywhere near as bad as what it was right then, as long as I kept seeking him out, and that he was going to be the one that was going to be the guide and the director of my life. And so that's when, my life just was his, and it is. Doesn't mean I don't do things wrong, but all in the same.
It's a beautiful story. Our relationship with God is a mystery. Somehow God is at work and we're at work, and I hear you talking about seasons where you're praying, and I hear seasons of God doing miracles that you can't believe. If you were going to articulate what it's like when God's doing the work, when you're doing the work, how much of the work is it God doing? How much of it is you're doing? How do you describe the mysterious interaction in a relationship with God, the mysterious interaction between how much God is at work and how much you're at work, and kind of how that dance works?
Okay, so I would say that God does the work, but we have to have our heart in the right place with the right attitude. And we do the physical, like, you're walking down the road and you're moving one foot in front of the other, but God is moving all of the pieces in front of you. And you're not really just walking out your own life anymore, and it's a different perspective, and you desire a better life, but you desire a life that's pleasing to him, and you want to have a life that's going to be something that's going to bring people together, to let people know that, your circumstance is your circumstance, but God's got a greater plan. Even to use your story, it could do something to change somebody's life. And so that's kind of, one foot in front of the other, and knowing that God is the one that's doing the work. The work comes in front of you, and he prepares a place.
Joni, thank you so much for sharing your story. As I hear, there's some things that have never changed about you. You want to make friends with every stranger you've ever met, from whether it be in a grocery store when you're growing up, or when people walk in the doors of our church, or you meet someone at the school or the park. But some things have changed. You went from telling yourself a story, if people knew the real me, they wouldn't love me, I had to hide that, to let me share my story, my strengths, weaknesses, my beauty and brokenness with the whole world, and know that there's nothing can change the unchanging love of Jesus. So thanks so much for sharing your story.
Can I share one last tiny thing?
Sure.
Okay, so one thing that has to come of all of this is to recognize that God is doing work not only in our personal lives, but he's doing in the work of others. And so Drew and I had prayed for our kids and the mistakes that I had made in the past, that he would be able to make a way that their life would be made better. And so the Lord brought a girl into Rigo's life, and her name's Lisette, and she's an incredible person. And I'm very thankful to have her as the stepmom of my children. And at the same time, the person that Rigo was, he's not anymore. And it is forgiveness in our hearts to recognize that people are someone, and then they become something else. And Annalise doesn't know the backstory, but she has been blessed with wonderful parents from all four people. So is little Rigo. And so it's a beautiful story to come to a pause, because God is able to work in everyone's life, not just one individual. So
it's beautiful.
Praise God, right?
Thank you. Well, friends, thank you so much for listening to the Life Stories podcast. I hope as you hear the story that you relate to and say, me too, and also say, that might be how God is working in my life as well. If you've enjoyed this story, we're going to put a link down to reach out to Joni. You can say thank you for sharing her story, share something that spoke with you. If this has been a blessing to you, please like it. Please subscribe to the podcast. The best compliment you could ever give us is to share it on social media with your friends or send it to someone who you think needs to hear it. Again, we hope that you found yourself in this story and said, God is working in my life too. We love you. We'll see you next time.